Well, greetings, friends. Thank you so much for coming. And welcome to those of you that are here. And I always try to remember to do this. Welcome to those of you who are watching later online, which is usually about 10 times the number that actually show up in person, which is a cool thing about the outreach of our church. We have people who can't show up here, but they live in town, and then people that live all over the place. So that's a great thing. And thank you for coming to talk about Richard Rohr. A couple people expressed to me they went from wonder to crushed disappointment because they saw our ad and they thought, man, how did you get Richard Rohr to come here? He's a bit older and not well and doesn't travel, and I'm not sure I could get him here if he was. But anyway, so it's even better, though, because I don't have Richard Rohr. I have Simon Spence and Reverend Linwood Brooks. Greet them. You can welcome. Yes. And there's some other clergy that are here visiting in the room. Goodness gracious, it's really amazing. So thanks for coming together. And we want to talk about Richard Rohr. And some people know about him and follow him. Some people get his daily emails, although the last 2 times I checked, his morning email isn't his anymore. It came from one of his colleagues. We may say more about that later. Richard Rohr is a Franciscan, and a lot of you know my love for St. Francis and the Franciscan order, so that's to his credit just from the outset. And he's famous for so much, his writings and such. He's been for, I don't know how long, with the Center for Action and Contemplation that is in Albuquerque. That's a lot of what he's about. It's contemplation and it's action. A lot of times in the Christian world, we have people that are all about action and changing the world, and other people are just all about contemplation. But for him, it's always contemplation and action, how contemplation of God leads to faithful action. He is I try to come up with catchy phrases like he does. I'm no good at it, but I'll try this one. He's a mystic, but he's never mystifying. That's about the best I could do. Sorry. So he's a Christian mystic, and that makes you think, oh, this is going to be some ethereal thing, but yet he's, I think, really a master of taking some core truths of the Christian faith and expressing them in a way that all kinds of people can understand. I love photos of Richard Rohr. There must be some where he doesn't have that big, huggable bear smile, but he usually looks like that. He's just a cheerful person. I think he exudes a huge amount of joy and so on. Some of you in this room look like you're in the latter half of your life. I would commend to you his book that is called Falling Upward, sort of a spirituality of aging. There's also the book, let me do my slide here, called, I didn't get there, called The Universal Christ, which is a really cool book. It's controversial. It's so interesting to me. I could quibble with this or that in his book, as could anybody. But it seems sometimes a book becomes controversial when somebody is overly generous with the grace of God. Isn't that interesting? There are always people within Christianity, we got to have some limits. We got to have rules. We got to... He's very generous with what God is about and who God is and the grace of God. It's really lovely. When I first read this book, I said, now here's a guy who has read the book of Colossians, which go home, read it. It's a book people don't get to. Christ is not underrated in Colossians. It's extravagant. It's boundless. What the writer of Colossians has to say, and it's a lot like what Richard Rohr has to say. So it's sort of an all-enveloping, transcending view of what God is about. It's about solidarity over judgment. It's about hope over condemnation. There's so much condemnation in the world, and then it creeps into the church, and it's just not of God. If you want a favorite verse of the day in Romans, Paul says, there is no condemnation in Christ Jesus. There is no condemnation. Solidarity over judgment. And then on just page 3 of the Universal Christ, I love this, Rohr, typical kind of thing that he says, you are a child of God and always will be, even if you don't believe it. Right? That's got to be the starting point. You're a child of God, you always will be, even if you don't believe that, even if you don't accept that. That is how God regards you. So that's a lovely thing. Simon's my neighbor. And he's married to one of our great employees here, Ellen Spence. And Simon, you have a history with Richard Rohr. You actually went out to Albuquerque and you met him and talked with him. Tell us a little bit about him just as a person, and then why you're so drawn to him, which I know you are.
Yeah, and I can maybe start with as a person. So I was fortunate enough right before the pandemic to go out to one of his conferences that he had in Albuquerque with probably about 1,500 other people. And when I got to meet him, the one thing that he left me with is I felt that I was the most important thing in the world at the time that I was talking to him. His entire attention was on me, even though he'd never met me before. And even though there was 1,500 people in the room, it was, you can just walk up to him and start talking to him. And that was amazing. But what he left me with, as we parted, was he told me, "You're enough." And I didn't really know that was what I needed to hear at the time, and didn't really know at the time that I was really broken inside and really didn't think I was enough. Because I projected this image to everybody else of being successful, of being enough, being in control, and all of those things, even though I really wasn't. And I didn't also realize when he told me that I just looked up this morning, and what he told me was paraphrasing his most famous quote. So I just learned that today. And it's, "There's nothing to prove and nothing to protect. It is who I am, and it's enough." And I think I was brought up to not think I was enough. I was brought up to not think I was safe. I was brought up to believe that the only thing I was what I accomplished and the praise I would get from people for what I accomplished. And I was brought up myself in a non-believing house where we were brought up that only really stupid people believed in God, that God definitely didn't exist, and that it was just a crutch to kind of control people to do things that society wanted them to be. And a ton of what Richard Rohr speaks about is this idea of you're born into order. And for him, when he speaks about order, it's mostly about he's speaking to the people who the order they were brought into was the church order. Going to church, being told here are the rules, here's what to do, here's what not to do. And then he talks about as you fall upward, you tend to at some point question that and fall into disorder. Well, that doesn't make sense to you anymore. And truly growing up is going from order to disorder to reorder. And I've thought about that and reflected on it, that for me, my journeys may be a little bit different, because the order that I had to go into disorder from is a lack of belief in God. And my order was God doesn't exist. My disorder was, oh, maybe God does exist. And then what do I do with that became sort of the reorder. And another quote from him.
And I'd insert there, Simon, on the other hand, that same path can be going from belief, but it's a, how do I put it? A naive, unrealistic belief in God, right? A lot of children grow up thinking God will always protect me. God will always bless me. Everything will be, and then something happens. There's a terrible death. There's a terrible loss. And they're like, there can't be a God because I got, and it was a naive view. So we become disillusioned, which is a word that I love. It means that you carried some illusions about God, and then you shed those illusions and you move toward a new order. And I just mentioned this quickly. Some of you came to the session that I did on Dietrich Bonhoeffer, and Dietrich Bonhoeffer, toward the end, I mentioned that he talks about a religionless Christianity. What he's suggesting there is religion can be this whole business that Simon was talking about. You learn the rules, and God wants you to stay in place and do the right thing. And Rohr, he has a great quote, I used it on Sunday morning, is that for the untransformed self, religion is a very dangerous thing. And we see it all the time, right? For people who aren't converted to be close to God, to learn all these things that we're talking about, religion becomes a source of meanness and judgment and division. So, okay, Simon, your next quote, thank you.
Yeah, and if I look at sort of what my next quote is that I wanted to share with you, and I'm trying to share with you sort of the quotes from Richard and sort of what that has meant to me, and it's the idea that, well, let's see, it's someplace here. Love is what and who you are in your deepest essence. Love is a place that already exists inside of you, but is also then greater than you. And that was something I didn't know. I didn't understand. And I think the places that I saw that love modeled to me that probably drew me to Rohr in the first place was really from becoming part of the Barnett family and becoming part of Gina Barnett, who's my grandmother out there, and coming into that family from my relationship with my wife. And I didn't know it at the time that that was going to transform me. And I didn't even know that I needed it, because I thought I was pretty flippin' okay to begin with, right? And I saw it, and it was modeled to me, and then that drew me into religion, and then I had a mystical, transformational experience when I decided to go on a mission for my 40th birthday, and I went to Rio de Janeiro and really felt like God was with me as I walked up the steps of Christ the Redeemer, which is an amazing place if nobody's been. But then, over the next 7 or 8 years, I had my father die of alcoholism. I had my brother die of addiction. I had my best friend die as a result of cancer. And those deaths really put me in a spiral and really put me in this place that James was talking about of disillusion. And I think what really got me out of that was I tried to think my way out of it. And what Rohr would say, and he's a huge believer in the 12 Steps program and in that as a spiritual journey, he's written a book about it, is this whole idea that you don't think your way, it's what is the action that you're taking today. Because I tried to keep being in my head, and in my head was not a good place. And I needed to get into my heart, and then I needed to get into doing. And it's out of trying to do the right thing that I could be finally healed. And I have a lot of gratitude to the family I'm married into, and I have a lot of gratitude to this church and to Richard Rohr, and at the end of the day, to God showing me that really love will conquer all.
And we're, friends, we're in the center of hope. During the pandemic, we discovered hope was the word that really resonated. Richard Rohr, like some other theologians that I love, really says to us, hope is everything. And hope isn't a naive belief that, oh, tomorrow will be a better day, like Scarlett O'Hara or something. Hope is different from optimism. Optimism is, oh, tomorrow's going to be a better day and everything's going to be hunky-dory and end well. Hope is like God has got us, and hope is able to cope if tomorrow is a worse day, because hope is something that is of God and will sustain us. Rohr says a lot about hope. Do you have something there, Sam? I think we landed on something yesterday when we were talking about this.
Yeah.
Trying to remember.
It's really this idea that God saves humanity not by punishing it, but by restoring it. And this idea that that's why God sent Jesus to earth, is to give us hope, to be with us in our suffering. And everybody suffers, and life is about suffering, very sort of Buddhist type of idea. But the idea is that God is just there to experience it, and that's definitely what I've experienced in my life, is that thing that has allowed me to survive has been, at the end of the day, being able to give up control and realize that I don't control any outcome. I have to give it up to God. And it's not that I can think that, because lots of people, I've definitely thought that and said it and not really meant it. There's a difference between really being able to give up on the outcome that's going to occur. And it's so counterintuitive to what I do at work. All I care about is outcomes. It's so counterintuitive to this idea of you work really hard so that you can have something. And it's really just been a transformative experience for me. And that's what really Rohr has taught me, is that it's that belief and it's that idea, like Henry Nouwen, that we're all beloved of God. And that's been a critical idea, is to feel that true love.
And you know this, many of us who are here, we live in a culture where it's just so hard to get where Simon is talking about, because a lot of the people in our world are doing really well. And they can kind of be in denial. Like they may say, oh, I know I'm not in control. I give control up to God. But really, you're managing your existence pretty well. There's a lot of success. Your kids are doing whatever. And so sometimes you hear a story about someone being broken, and we tend to do two things. One, we pity, which is like not a thing theologically. We blame. So if someone tells you, my child has, I don't know, whatever, dropped out of school, my child is a victim of addiction, my child, whatever, you might, to their face, show them some pity in a world like ours, but then privately you're thinking, I wonder what they did wrong. If they had just done the right things, their kid would. We do this stuff all the time, so the illusion of control actually makes us smug and judgmental people. And we're not actually in control, and it's better when we realize that we are not in control. Brene Brown has kind of made a cottage industry out of vulnerability being a good thing. She didn't think of it. It's in the Bible. It's in Richard Rohr. It's all over the place. I want to go to Linwood in a minute, but Simon, I want to ask you one other question. Talk some about connection and community. So often people think spirituality is kind of this solo thing between me and God. It's something I do in private when I'm alone with God, and we do need to be alone with God and be good with that. Talk about connection and community.
And I think of the best examples of that in my life have been when I've been on mission trips, and when I've been in Costa Rica, when I've been in Brazil, and the genuine love that they have for each other, the level of connection that they have. Sometimes I think the less material wealth you have, the easier it is to have this connection with others. And sometimes what we have here is a lot of success, but a lot of aloneness as a result of that success. So where probably I saw the best example of this was going to Brazil and going to visit a person from the US who had been there for 40, 50 years, walking in some of the worst slums of Brazil. Everywhere he walked, everybody knew him, everybody came up to him. He could negotiate with all of the drug lords to allow us to go travel across all of these places that even the police wouldn't go to. And we always felt safe and welcome. And that was only because he didn't judge anybody. He loved everyone there. And that was, if you say, who have you seen that's a saint? That's a person I can think of who I've seen as a saint. And I think James knows who that is.
Yeah, Marion Way, I got emotional just thinking about him. Such a holy man. His wife died recently, had her funeral down in South Carolina. Holy man. We need people like that. It's one of the reasons we try to get you to go on mission trips. You know, you can go to a resort with your vacation time. You can do a lot of things. But if you want to build your soul, like, go somewhere where it's challenging. Go somewhere where it's difficult. You never regret it. You come back and you met the most amazing people, and you're really changed, and you make a whole different kind of connection. I want to turn to Linwood Brooks. Linwood and I, good grief, we've known each other for many years, growing up as young United Methodist pastors together. Linwood has a son who sings in our choir now, which is a wonderful thing. And Linwood reached out to me not long after Rohr's newest book came out, which I was struck by. I'd not read it yet, and he had got it and had started on it. It's called The Tears of Things, Prophetic Wisdom for an Age of Outrage. Just that title makes you think, this is a book we actually probably need to read if you don't know anything else about it, because we live in a world of outrage. And if anything, the outrage seems all justified. Like, that must be holy and of God. I'm outraged. I'm so angry. Those other people are so stupid and wrong, and they're such a menace to society. So Linwood, tell us a little bit about what struck you about this book and what in it has meant a lot to you, and kind of how Rohr is speaking to you at this point in time.
Well, I contacted you because I was really looking for some support and some help. I was interested in taking a class here at the church, or if you knew of something else in the community, but looking for something to help me deal with the anxiety about the current situation we're living in today. And I will say it's primarily political, but there are so many spiritual parts of this that we need answers in order to deal with what's going on in our world today. And I'm not finding the answers in the world in terms of people working together on in the government or in so many different areas who are supposed to be in charge of our living and making decisions for us and helping us through all of this, and they don't seem to have any answers. There is sort of blown away by this whole situation, and everybody's just sticking to their guns. So how do we deal? Where do we find wisdom in an age of outrage? I'm feeling that outrage, and I don't know what to do with it. And so I called James and asked. I said, "Do you know of anything going on?" And he said, "Well, let me take a look at the book." And so he did, and called me back and said, "Well, if you're interested in leading maybe a group of people to read this together and talk about it and come up with some ideas, then why don't we pursue that and see what we can do?" So that's kind of how this all started. I just and I love it as I dig into Rohr's approach on this, because he's looking at the prophets, which I must admit, I earlier said to someone that Stephanie, I said, "Stephanie, well, I didn't study the prophets as much as I wish I had back in seminary." Well, the truth is, there's so much I wish I had studied more of, because you just don't have time. I mean, I was in seminary for 3 years. You were in like, what, 7 or 8, 9, 10, whatever.
28. I was a slow learner.
You just don't have enough time, and you're not in a level of maturity at that point where you can receive it all or accept it all. I mean, we evolve throughout our lifetime. So, but this idea of going to the prophets to deal with outrage, the prophets themselves experienced a great deal of outrage. They were just outraged by the behavior of the leaders of the religious establishment and the political establishment, and they believed that God was calling them to call them out on the things the decisions that they were making, and the things that they were saying, and the ways that they were leading the country, and at the same time, they were ignoring a lot of the covenantal laws that they had agreed to and had been introduced to and had been established their whole life upon. So the the prophets are pretty amazing, and I'm just thrilled to get to understand it from this perspective that Rohr is using to help us begin to look at the ways we get along with one another, and what does Christianity have to offer in terms of reconciliation with people who are so different, at least their opinions about governmental issues and society's issues, those kinds of things are so different. And so how are we ever going to reconcile? And the prophets had to wrestle with this same issue. They went through a period of outrage, and then as their maturity progressed, they became mournful of all of the dissonance and the suffering that was taking place. The suffering was all around, and so the prophets began to realize that this is not something that's going to be figured out with political decisions and that sort of thing. That there's got to be some sort of a willingness on the part of all of us to be more accepting and to find ways to work things out.
I mean, when I ordered the book, I was surprised when I actually opened it, because I'd ordered the book, and I saw the title. It said Prophetic Wisdom. I was thinking, like, Richard Rohr is a prophetic kind of guy, and I'm going to hear what he has to say. And it is what he has to say, but he actually does what we're actually all to do, which is, let's go back to the Scriptures and see what is there. Not weaponizing the Scriptures, which people are always happy to do nowadays. I'll find a verse, then I'll bludgeon the other people and prove that I am right. There's nothing to prove. There's nothing to protect. So he opens up these prophets of old, and to me the most beautiful part of it is, some of you have heard me do this before, you can't read tone of voice into the Bible. And the tone of voice we read into it tells us a lot about ourselves. So John the Baptist is kind of my favorite example. If I have people, John the Baptist says, repent. And I bet most of us in our minds, the tone of voice we hear is, repent, right? But that tells us something about what's in our own mind. John the Baptist, I like to imagine him in a more plaintive, almost tearful way, pleading with us, saying, please repent, please turn, please know that you're loved by God. Please know that there's a better way. So he talks about these prophets. They all begin with tears. Jeremiah, were that my eyes a fountain of tears. When Jesus comes, and he comes to the city of Jerusalem, and he doesn't hurl thunderbolts down on the city of Jerusalem for its failure, he weeps over the city. And Rohr says the place that we need to begin isn't, well, we're right and those other people wrong, and how can they be so stupid? That's so exhausting, isn't it? Like, we need to find the space just to grieve over where we have come to be as a people, and as a nation, and as a world. And Rohr really says what this other great spiritual writer that I love named Maggie Ross says, that tears are of God, tears are holy, and tears are like water courses, and it clears and cleanses the way for new life to come. Like, I love that image. Like, when we weep, something new, something fresh, something life-giving can come in its place. So that's a lovely thing. Talk some more. What'd you find in the book that was interesting? Or Simon, you've read this book as well. What?
I think what I found about the book is basically it treats the prophets as the beginning of each prophet as anger. And it's anger at the circumstances, anger at what's made this happen. And then he talks about how the voice of each prophet changes through the book. Mm-hmm. And at the end of each book, it's all about God's love. Mm-hmm. And it's all about forgiveness. And it's not about judgment.
And not even it is about forgiveness, but this is so important. We tend to think of, okay, I need God's forgiveness. Well, of course you need God's forgiveness. God gives us something better than forgiveness, and forgiveness seems pretty cool. What God is about is redemption, right? If Simon really gets on my nerves, I forgive you. We're not whole yet. right? What we need is the redemption of the relationship where we can love each other and be friends again, right? So what God is about is redemption, which is beyond even forgiveness.
Yeah. And at least as it's this idea that what starts in the beginning is this idea of separateness, of there's got to be an enemy, and it's got to be this dualistic thinking of if things aren't going well, I have to find somebody to blame for it. It has to not be me, and it has to tend to be the stranger. And
Scapegoat.
Yep, which is Jesus came to prove to us that he was the ultimate scapegoat, and to prove that that was the way God loved us, is to show that scapegoating wasn't the right approach to anything. And we in today's world, it's really easy to us against them, because that's just us. I'm inside, you're outside. And the prophets and the Richard Rohr book is saying that there's no inside and outside. There's everybody's in it together, and there is no separateness. And that idea of separation is the idea that leads us to sin. And sin is the vision of being separate from God. And anytime we're separate from God, then we can't feel God's love, even though God's love is always there for us. So anger, resentment, fear are all of the things that drive us into that mindset. And that can happen both at a society level, but it really more happens inside your day-to-day life. You can get angry at somebody. You can get resentful of somebody. You can be fearful of an outcome. And all of those things lead you away from God.
Yeah, and the us versus them, I think the way Rohr wants to undercut that is we kind of have a us versus them, and then who's right and who's wrong and who wins and who loses. It's not just a matter, though, of, oh, let's just get along and let's just kind of be nice to each other and let's hold hands and sing Kumbaya. It's better than that. It's not finding common lower ground. It's finding higher ground, and the higher ground is what is God about in the world. Both sides, if you will, need to think about what is God about in the world. And the prophets are all about reminding us of what God has always been about in the world. So the prophets don't just say, oh, just be nice and get along. There is a content to God's way in the world, and that's what the prophets remind the people of. But God's way in the world is a way of humility. It's a way of love. It's a way of compassion. It's a way of community. So we have to ask, what is working against community? What is working against compassion? What is working against connection? And those are the things that we need to be attentive to.
Yeah, there's just so much pain in the world today, and we all experience that in our personal lives and in our collective lives and in our groups. And, the prophets were extremely sensitive to this, and I guess they were probably overly sensitive, and that was part of their call to become prophets. But they saw the pain in the lives, and particularly when the leaders and the religious people didn't participate in what they had agreed to do. They broke the laws. They just as we often do, they said, well, that's just in certain situations. And there was a lot of pain. A lot of people were suffering, and so they were desperate, and they were trying so hard. And they started out just by being angry, which is exactly how we all start out, by being angry at others who we believe are causing the pain that we're experiencing. Whether it's true or not, we desperately look for that opportunity to become enraged and get rid of it. But as time goes on, of course, that doesn't build anybody up. It only tears us down. And we don't find solutions as a result of that anger and so forth. We can talk about what the solutions are till we're blue in the face, but if we don't have that compassion and empathy that allows us to bridge some of those differences that we have with others, we're never gonna improve the situation. We're never going to make that next step. So the tiers of things is what they're talking about. We have to experience those. We have to go through those and realize what they're for, not just to flop around in them or whatever, but to realize that there's real pain out there and to see it realistically and see, well, maybe what can we change? What are some things that we can do to help in this situation? So the tiers of things are really central to this whole solution and this whole way of dealing with the divisiveness and with the brokenness in our world today.
And the Rohr quote that sort of sums that up is, all great spirituality is about what to do with pain. Not what to do with joy, but what to do with pain.
When I first saw the title of the book, it's interesting, like what tone of voice do you read into the Bible? When I first saw the book and I out loud in my head read the title, I read the terrors, not tears, the terrors. The Southern, the terrors of things. It's both. We live in a torn world, which is the cause of tears. I want to, Uyan Kim preached a brilliant sermon Sunday before last where he told about his habit of anytime he goes to see a movie, he looks up what the ending is first. And that this heightens your enjoyment of the movie, which I've not attempted that yet. But so here's a spoiler alert. Here's the end of the Richard Rohr book, which I would really commend to you. We'll talk about this in a minute. This is a good book to get. It's easy to get, easy to order. I think we have a few in our Goodness Gracious shop, but you can find these online. They'll ship it to you the next day. That's great. Lynn Wood is interested in gathering a group of people to read it and to talk about it. That might be a good summer project, so we'll talk about how to do that in a minute. But I want to read the last page. So at the end of all this, Richard Rohr sums up what he calls the way of the prophet. And he's not suggesting the prophet is a guy like James Howell who stands in front of people. The prophet, that's what God is calling all of us to be in this kind of situation. So what is the way of the prophet? And I'll just read this. Prophets embrace religion as a way of creating communities of solidarity with justice and suffering. They look for where the suffering is and go there, just as Jesus did. They speak of solidarity with one God, which also implies solidarity with everyone else. They're essentially mystical and unitive, not argumentative. The goal they proclaim is not to prove oneself worthy, innocent, or pure. We've heard that theme this morning. The prophet learns to be for and with and not against. What if we all just said that? I'm going to be for and with instead of against other people. They're for those who are suffering or excluded. That's just a Christian thing, right? Some people today want to pretend there's a different kind of Christianity. That's not a Christian thing. It is a Christian thing to be for those who are suffering or excluded. They have perfected the art of self-criticism, and they make it their priority. They include the opposites and thus transcend them. Salvation to them is the unitive consciousness in this world, not the anticipation of later rewards or fear of future punishments. They are centered not on sin, but on growth, change, and life. They know that the best teachers are reality itself and creation. They live well with paradox and diversity in their mature stages. They do not reject the way of the priest. They have just moved beyond it alone. That's something he talked about earlier in the book. They are not based in fear of God or self. Anytime you see somebody who's angry, what you're seeing is somebody who is terribly afraid. You always have to remember that. When you see anger, what you're really seeing is a mask over fear. They are always drawn to higher levels of motivation. Salvation is, first of all, experienced now. They start with judgment, but end with divine compassion. They call forth tears more than anger, the tears of everything. And those tears are more tears of gratitude and joy than tears of sadness for what might have been. Lovely words there. Lynn, would tell us a little bit about kind of your idea of maybe reading and such?
I was thinking, I really don't have anything set in stone. I'm flexible at this point, but I think we should just assume a weekly reading period and get together and talk and discuss. There are 10 chapters, and I can see us probably doing the thing in about 10 weeks. So,
if you are interested, and that's you and you joining us online, we'll come up with some kind of sign-up deal where you can express but you could just today even just say to us, hey, I'd like to be part of that, and we'll start to gather people together. What anything else about Richard Rohr? There's so much about Richard Rohr. We could talk about him forever. Simon, what have we missed? You and I talked about a lot yesterday.
I don't quite know where. I would say that for me, the other thing that I've got out of Rohr is this jumping off point to all sorts of other people. And this jumping off point to me about the Enneagram, he's written a book about the Enneagram. That's an amazing way to sort of understand yourself and understand others. It's the jumping off point for me to Thomas Martin, to Teresa of Avila, to all sorts of Christian mystics, to the wisdom of the desert mothers and desert fathers, to the love of, he's got a book all about the Trinity, and it all is very Eastern Orthodox, and looking at that viewpoint of the Trinity as it's a flow between Christ, the Holy Spirit, and God, and looking at these iconography of Eastern Orthodoxism and talking about that. So I've gone so many places that you often don't see if you read something that's contemporary, and he always takes you back to know what he's really talking about is based upon 2,000 years of Christian thinking and wisdom that got lost in sort of a reaction to the industrial age and to science and having to be about facts and proof, which is not what Christianity ever used to be about. It used to be about believing in something that cannot be proved, not trying to prove something to non-believers. So I get that feeling of the ancientness and what did Christians do who were the first Christians in the first 300 or 400 years before Christianity became the Holy Roman Empire? Very different than when it became the church of the establishment. And the opportunity of now is the establishment isn't Christian anymore, right? The opportunity now to return to something that's more akin to a thing that can be based upon love, and a thing that can be based upon togetherness and not trying to separate people.
That's so wise, Simon. I'll close with this. I was at a birthday party on Monday evening, and there was a guy that I didn't know, and he was really chatting me up about religion. It was fun. And I made an assumption. I said, oh, what church are you a part of? He said, I'm a Zen Buddhist. I said, cool. Tell me more about that. It was so interesting. He'd been reared in the church, and he said he turned to Zen Buddhism. Why? He was sick and tired, and it was breaking him to have a religion that was all about rules and guilt. He said, instead of rules and guilt, what I really needed was meditation and love. And I just thought, holy smoke. Like, we fail so miserably. That's always been at the very heart of Christianity, but then churches, for whatever reason, they forget about this. We've always had meditation. We've always had silence. We've always had love. It's always at the core of who we are, but then we lose our way sometimes. It's just such a sad loss. Friends, thank you for coming. And what time is it right now? Oh, man, we're great. Sunday morning, there's a clock back there, so I know to hush, but we don't have that in here. Let me ask if you guys have any questions, not for me so much, but for these two. Anything? Stephanie, Reverend Hand.
Yes, I'm so glad that you're going to entertain questions, because I do have one. And my question is, which I love, your statement on forgiveness, redemption. Could you unpack the difference, the tangible difference between what redemption is and what forgiveness is?
I mean, at different levels. You're asking me that because I talked about it. Yeah, thank you. I think I wasn't well churched growing up, so I think I grew up with this idea that sometimes I sin. I do something God don't want me to do, and I want God to sort of erase that being on the negative side of my ledger, so God's not annoyed with me any longer, right? So God forgives me. I want way more than that from God, right? I don't want the life that I have lived, it's okay. I want to be changed. I want to be transformed. I want to become holy. I want to become more transparent to God in who I am. It feeds into relationships. Like I say, Simon can do something, and I'm so annoyed with him, but I forgive you. It can almost be demeaning, right? I was with this married couple a while back, and the woman had misbehaved terribly. But her husband was like, I forgive. And she looked at me and she said, it is so hard to live with a saint. Kind of interesting, right? So he's saying, I forgive you, but there was no redemption in their life or in their relationship, right? So the redemption is something, and I don't think this is where our faith comes in, right? Is that I think humans on their own can come by a kind of forgiveness. I think we have the capacity to do that. Redemption is it's almost beyond our capacity. It's really about reconciliation. It's about a healing. It's about a wholeness that you can't just grit your teeth and get it. I think that's the work of God's Spirit, despite the parts of us that want to remain divided. The parts that I want to stay in control, right? If I have my life and I want God to forgive me, and then God forgives me, I'm still in control. It's still my life. I don't want it to be my life. I want it to be God's life, right? And so that takes me in a whole nother direction, and I'm a totally, hopefully, different kind of person coming out of that. Anna, yes.
I have a question for Simon, and something that you said really stuck with me because I'm a mother to two.
Bless your heart.
But I find myself in this seemingly daily conversation of, you've got to do this, put your phone down, work harder. Our tax, we strive to be our best at what we do. And when you said that Richard Rohr said to you, you are enough, and you have been going through feeling like you had it together, right? And when he said that to you, you were able to access the brokenness inside of you. And I'm curious to know more, why do you think, and I think too, so much of this conversation has me really reflecting on, is there room for me as a parent to practice more love, or, telling my child that he's enough, right? And could that perhaps be a message that I'm not communicating enough? So I'm just curious to hear more about what you think it is that made that,
I think, if I look at sort of my dealings with my kids, I too often celebrated them for the things they did, the goals they scored, the grades they got, and not enough did I celebrate them for who they were. And not enough did I celebrate them for how they dealt with their losses and their failures. And I was definitely the good times dad, and right behind you is my wife, and she was definitely the one who was with them in the bad times to tell them that you are enough and you are a child of God. And I think there's some of both, because some of what parents have to teach is we need to teach order and rules and structure, and so does the church. But then the other part that we have to teach is love triumphs over all of that. And at the end of the day, I've learned in my own life, I've done a lot of things I regret. And it's separating those facts from that's not who I am. And trying to model who you are isn't what you've done. It's who you are. And who we are is something that God gave us. Does that help?
And Anna, I'd add, a couple of our youth staff are here. We are seeing, our youth program is amazing. It's just amazing. We are seeing, though, unprecedented psychological and interpersonal challenges that kids are facing, and some of it's COVID, some of it's social media, some of it's what compounds it, and especially for kids in our culture, is if you want to talk about people under pressure to prove themselves and he feel like they are not enough, just look at our adolescents. I've got to make good grades. I've got to get into Duke. I've got whatever. They got all this just immense pressure, and they can't be who they are. They've always got to be propping it up, trying to be somebody that they aren't. They learn that from their parents, but also from the society. And then it becomes very hard to do the kind of thing that, I don't know, Sam's here today. I'll talk about him. He's a young guy, and he's trying to listen to what's God calling him to do. You know, if we have this pressure society, I've got to achieve, I've got to do. But Sam's trying to listen to like what does God see in me? What is God asking of me? Simon's adopted daughter, Megan, same thing. Super talented and gifted and so on, but she's come by the space to try to ask, what does God want me to do with the rest of my life, right? That's very different from the I've got to prove. It can happen in ministry. When I started as a pastor, I was trying to prove myself as a pastor. It can invade any and everything. It can invade how you are a parent, how you are a spouse. I'm going to prove, but there's nothing to prove. There's nothing to protect. You are loved. You are enough. It's just so hard for us to come by, but it's God's truth. I didn't mean to butt in and ramble so much on that. Well, the Duke thing, I affirm. I mean, anyway, let me just say this real quickly. I think I felt this as a parent. I feel this as a pastor. We all feel this thing is that like I've got to do it right. I can't fail at what I'm doing. We're all always failing at what we're doing, and it's okay. That's just part of it, right? As a parent, I was going into it, I didn't know it. I thought, I'll be the best dad in human history. I will do everything just right. No, you're going to mess up. And you can't help it. You have blind spots. You can't even see what you are doing. That's part of our vulnerable, broken nature that we share in common. You're not going to get it all right. It's not going to be perfect. That's why the love wins at the end of the day, because that's the one thing that you can be sure will be in place.
I think for me, there was a change when, and I wasn't like this. Now I maybe like a little bit more of sharing my struggles and my vulnerability. If all you do is share your successes, you don't model this, oh, there's been a lot of things that have been painful to me and haven't worked out the way I wanted them to work out, and here's what happened to me. So I think as your kids grow up, it's about seeing it as less of a parent-child relationship and more of a relationship where you model vulnerability and you model yourself not feeling safe, and that they can then learn that it's okay for them not to be safe, and it's okay for them to have pain. And I think that's the only way you can do it. You can't model it by telling them, here's the rules, and I'm always perfect, so you have to be perfect. But unfortunately, we often feel that's how we have to act. Does that help?
Yeah, because I'm thinking about, well, I shared with them an example of a story from college where I didn't, I messed up, but I'm like, actually, there's things right now in my life that I could have shared that probably would have been actually truly vulnerable, and so thank you for that.
No problem.
Yeah, I didn't want this to be a parenting class, but on that, I'll tell you this. We have 3 kids. And with my kids, I thought, I'll tell them the stories of the stupid things that I did, and this will help them. My first 2 were like, oh gosh, thank you very much. And my third one thought, that sounds fun. I want to try that. So that strategy failed. Anything else? Meredith.
In the book, The Tears of Things, what are you most excited, which chapter is the one you're most excited about sharing?
Well, that's,
I'm like, I can't wait to get to chapter 7. Whatever.
But besides the last page that I just read.
conclusion is, they're all good, and the trouble, he talks about good trouble, and there's a lot of that, and, oh, I'm so sorry, thank you. I don't know that there's one that I can choose, because they all have a unique import. So I think they're all good. I really do. I was looking to see if what stands out. The a welcoming disorder is a foreign concept to me, and it's a little bit about what we were just talking about with the child, and the idea of going through disorder and then reordering. That kind of is a really new concept to me. I mean, I've thought about it in different ways, but this, because it forces us to deal with the issues that are before us. The disorder is what makes us uncomfortable, and we've got to find ways to deal with that and to not become so volatile and angry and hateful, resentful, all of those things. So I think dealing with that, the welcoming holy disorder, is something that really speaks out to me.
or even seeking it. Some of you heard me talk about this Old Testament scholar, Walter Brueggemann, just great thinker. And what he says all of Scripture actually is doing is you have an orientation to the world. You came, I don't know how you came by it. Your parents raised you a certain way. You have thoughts as you think. He said healing only comes when you embrace the disorientation that the Bible invites you into, and then you discover a reorientation. So it's like overcoming those illusions. The problem is we don't want to go through that, right? So we have our orientation and we just cling to it doggedly. This must be right. This is the way I was raised, whatever. This is the only way that I have ever known. And that we get defensive and we get fearful. And it's an insecurity, and it's the way to death. It's the way to meanness. It's the way to judgment, which isn't good for anybody, right? So to allow that holy disorder, that disorientation, then we can get reoriented. And that's the way to hope. That's the way to life.
And just as James said earlier, the fear, you know, if you find somebody who's angry, you're talking or looking at somebody who's deeply afraid. And we've got to figure out ways to approach that and find healthy ways to process that. And I'm hoping we can do that some when we're talking about these chapters. Is in the group actually bring in some illustrations or some examples of that and talk about how we can deal with the disorder and hopefully get to the whole reordering of things.
Simon, final word?
I just wanted to say thank you. I wanted to say thank you to James and thank you to Linwood for allowing me to be up on the panel with you guys. And I appreciate everybody in this room taking time out of their day to learn a little bit about Richard Rohr and learn a little bit about his newest book. So thank you to everybody here.
And don't do, okay, check mark by Richard Rohr, got that. This is an ongoing thing. It's not just about Richard Rohr. Like he says, opens you up to Thomas Merton and a bunch of other people. So again, thank you for coming. And how good is it, right, to be able to come together and think about the things of God and life and things that matter amidst a world of just so much craziness and anger and busyness and distractions. And it's just lovely that we can do this. So we're humbled and honored that you would come and share in this time with us. So thank you.